Greetings, everyone. When Jenny Lee announced last month that it was Black History Month theme for the open stage at Early Bird Coffee, I thought about it for a few moments and then said, okay, I can do this. I can try to do this. But what I found over the past month, trying to put together an article that would be meaningful and respectful on a topic I actually don't feel I knew a lot about, I became very nervous about sharing my thoughts. But with the encouragement of my son and Jenny Lee, I have put this article together, and hopefully it will give people food for thought. American historian and Pulitzer Prize winner Barbara Tuchman once said, "Nothing is more unfair than to judge the men of the past by the ideas of the present." Barbara Tuchman's quote in essence summarizes one side of an argument that several historians face in the representation of historical events. I'm not sure how many of us were interested in history when we were in school. In our defense, we probably did not fully understand what history had to teach us. I know that I studied music history, making charts and passing the test so that I could move on to the next grade. And now I could not tell you what year Beethoven was born or when he died. What I know is that he wrote beautiful music and was deaf by the end of his life. His music moves me and I enjoy listening to it, but his life history will not affect how I or others live our lives. And yet history does play a huge role in our lives today, and its lessons are ones we need to learn. For if we do not learn these important lessons, we will repeat the mistakes made in the past, something we should not do. Black history teaches us about people who were kidnapped from their home countries, torn from the arms of their families, transported in unhealthy and filthy conditions for the purpose of selling and enslaving them to plantation owners, a term we now call human trafficking. They were robbed of their homes, their language, and their freedom. It is difficult to not judge those who played an active role throughout history, and yet they were acting on the norms of their time. This does not excuse their treatment of those they enslaved, but their actions do teach us what not to do. We do not stand by when we witness a racial act or hear a racial slur. We speak up, refusing to listen or participate in racism of any kind. History has taught us there were people who recognized how wrong this was and fought to change things, to free Africans from their slave owners, and although they never went back to their homes, they were given the opportunity to live their lives as free people. And yet history teaches us that even as free people, they were not always free to do everything that the rest of the population could do. This too changed in thanks to those who refused to be denied their rights as human beings. Some were imprisoned, others beaten and hung, and yet people found the courage to continue to fight for their rights and the rights of others. Mary Ann Shadd Cary was the first Black woman to publish a newspaper called the Provincial Freeman. She established a racially integrated school in Windsor. She advocated for the rights of Black people and women. Lucy and Thornton Blackburn escaped from the enslavement in Kentucky to Michigan. They were recaptured and arrested, but they escaped a second time and fled to Canada. Thankfully, the Canadian courts refused to extradite them back to the United States. Viola Davis Desmond, whose face is on our Canadian $10 bill, was a businesswoman who chose to sit on the main floor of a movie theater designated for whites only. She was arrested, tried, and convicted for tax fraud for not paying the 1 cent difference in ticket prices, which is something I did not know until I researched for this article. Nova Scotia officially pardoned her in 2010 and extended an apology for the racism that Viola and all other Black Nova Scotians experienced. In the past, there were words and phrases that we used that we thought nothing of. We did not have the experience or the knowledge to know that what we were saying was insulting and often racist. And we have all innocently said something only to realize that it was inappropriate after someone points it out to us. One word in particular comes to mind, which I will not say, but just for the sake of clarity, it is the N word. It's a very offensive one. I know I was guilty of using it in conjunction with free when I played hide and seek as a young girl of 11 or 12. I have no idea why we used that term, but I know we did. That changed when a family from Jamaica moved into our neighborhood. I was unable to find any of those in hiding, so I yelled what I always yelled. One of the neighborhood mums very quickly chastised me for my being so inconsiderate and disrespectful with my words. At the time I felt ashamed, and yet if I applied the above quote, I can forgive myself for my lack of knowledge. We never used that phrase again and changed it to all's free. This was a valuable lesson for me to learn, and one I remember to this day. While in the Dominican Republic on vacation, I witnessed a loud and angry man voice his displeasure at having to wait for a golf cart to become available for him to use. The longer he waited, the louder and ruder he became, until he made the statement that if he could take the resort staff to his home country, he would whip them into shape. I could not remain silent. Without thinking of my own safety, I turned to the man and stated that he was not in his country at this moment, and he was guest in someone else's country. At that he stopped talking, moved away from me, and remained quiet. I would like to hope that I made him realize how rude he sounded and how inappropriate his sentence was. I wonder and hope he was using the word figuratively and not literally. We may have used the phrase whipping ourselves into shape. I am confident we did not mean it literally. Did the resort staff take it as a racial slur in reference to when slaves were whipped by their owners? I hope not, for their sake. These may not be historical events that I have just shared, but they taught me valuable lessons on respecting others, no matter the color of their skin, and to speak up when I see or hear something that is not right. By standing by and saying nothing, I would be condoning bad behavior with my silence. And to end on a happier note, music plays such a big role in the open stage nights that I felt I should share a little bit about the contributions of the Black community to our music scene. Did you know that our rock and roll music got its origins from African American or so-called race music, as it was called in the early half of the 20th century? During the times of slavery, when slaves were forbidden to speak their own languages, they sang of their feelings, joys, and sorrows, passing the songs down through the generations. It was lively, energetic, and soulful, and eventually became what we know as rock and roll. Musical styles such as Dixieland, gospel, the blues, and jazz were shaped in a major way by the rhythms and sounds that arrived in North America with the enslaved Africans. Using work calls and chants, accompanied by makeshift instruments, is what became rhythm, blues, rhythms, and ragtime. These sounds continue to influence the musical styles of today. We may not be old enough to remember them, but singers such as Billie Holiday and her song Strange Fruits, Ella Fitzgerald's Summertime, Muddy Waters' Mannish Boy, and Louis Armstrong, It's a Wonderful Life. But they told stories that we need to hear and remember, and certainly had an impact on the music of today. I would be remiss if I did not talk about Canadian musicians and their struggles to be heard. Even as recently as the 1990s, there were very few dedicated platforms for Black music. For Canadians to hear the music that they loved, they had to listen to a radio station out of Buffalo. Until I started researching for this article, I had never heard of Portia White, one of Canada's most famous Black singers. Nor have I heard of Liberty Silver, Eleanor Collins, or Robert Nathaniel Dutt. And then there is Oscar Peterson and Salome Bay, two well-known musicians. Their music speaks of hardship, heartache, love, and life. I am grateful to all the musicians who wrote, sang, and shared their music, for the music of today would not be the same without them. Thank you, and have a safe and wonderful